In this video, I'm going to tell you about the difference between build mode and paint mode, and how it can affect your motivation. So my hobby progress has been about as strong as I can make it lately, between some traveling, going to Gen Con, places like that, and some other stuff, and work, and of course, just making videos. That leaves a certain amount of time for hobby, and I've been trying to squeeze as much hobby as possible into that time as I can. One of the things I've been doing is I've been pretty heavy into build mode, making kill teams for the game Kill Team. I have at this point built, Astartes, Necrons, Death Watch, Death Guard, and Imperial Guard with some Tempestus, and there's one more. Necrons, Tyranids, which are nearly done. But I started thinking about how I've been doing all this stuff and how it kind of starts to build momentum. In the past, I've found for myself that starting in a particular mode, like starting in build mode, starts to build, for me at least, momentum, which keeps me motivated. I build maybe a squad of these guys, and then maybe I move to a squad of something else and bounce back and forth a little bit to give myself some variety so I don't feel like it's such a slog. But even when I'm building a big army, I built a 2,000 point Space Marine army, which I'm hopefully going to be painting before the end of the year, but they're all built, they're textured, all the little shoulder pads have got the little icons on them and all that kind of stuff, and they're all ready to go. But I built that all in one big long stretch. I would work on some intercessors for a while, and then I would work on the repulsor tank, and then I would hop back into some hellblasters, and then I went into the big Redemptor Dreadnought, but I still just kept building. What I didn't do in that situation was I did not build some guys and then paint them. I just kept my building going forward. For me, at least, this does a couple of different things. Number one is it keeps me in kind of like one gear. My hobby area is all set up for building. I've got my files, I've got my scrapers, I've got my glues, I've got all that stuff. It's all right there. Paints are all gone, and I just work on just building. And I just go through and I keep working. And like I said, I hop back and forth a little bit between types of models within that, say, big list, so that I'm not bored. But it's still, it's the momentum, and you just keep doing it until you get the project done, or until you hit that point where it really becomes a huge slog. In the situation with that particular list, I had a certain amount of points I wanted to get. I had a list that I'd already designed, and then I wanted to be done with it so that I could then move into texturing and then eventually painting. But in other situations, you may not have that same kind of end point. At least for me, when I find I don't have a specific endpoint, I notice that something in my brain and my motivation or whatever will give me an endpoint, and I will get to a point where all of a sudden I'm like, now I don't want to do this anymore. And what I've done in the past to stay still hobbying, but change up things for my brain enough, is I've then switched to painting. When you build a whole bunch of stuff, you then have a whole bunch of stuff to paint once you finally get tired of building, or once you hit your deadline, or you hit your end of your list or whatever. And for me, that helps to keep me on track, because now that all of my building is done, it is now time for me to put away the scrapers and the glue and to bring out the wet palette and the paints and the brushes and all that kind of stuff, and then get rolling in that regard. All of the kill teams that I've been doing lately, I've been building, one group at a time, based off of a list that I've kind of got pre-designed. I build stuff. Now, admittedly, I've been going outside and priming them with rattle can, but there's been a couple of reasons for that. Number one is the weather was pretty conducive to doing that. If it was, say, frozen hellscape like it gets around here that time of year, then I probably would have just built, and then spent an entire day just priming with my airbrush. But because it was nice out and not too humid and not too hot and all that kind of stuff, I could go out and do some rattle can, which is what I was planning on doing with those guys anyway. So I don't consider that to be paint mode. So I was pretty much still in build mode. I would spray them once they were done because there was a good day for it, and then I'd go back down to the basement and keep, building. But not everybody works the same way I do, and you might not as well. For a lot of people, the concept of sitting down and just building for maybe a month is very daunting. It's not something that they're interested in really thinking too closely about, thinking about doing, or actually even attempting. Some people, and I don't know that this is better or worse, I think it's just different. Some people want to build a project. Maybe it's a bunch of terrain, maybe it's a unit, maybe it's a crew for a skirmish game like Malifaux or something like that, and they build it and they get it all set and finished, and then they prime it, and then they immediately start painting. Now, there are very, very good people out there who only buy a unit of models when they need to build it and paint it, and then they don't have a backlog. Those people are probably kind of like four-leaf clovers to some degree. I don't really know anybody like that. I know plenty of people who've got a basement full of models, and so they've got plenty of projects to keep them busy. But for some people, sometimes you just have that. You like, I need to get this one unit together and then paint it rather than sitting and building a whole bunch all at once. Maybe you've got a big game that you're going to be playing with a friend of yours that you haven't seen in a while, and you want to get your new Malifaux crew ready to go, so you grab them for where they were squirreled away in the basement or your hobby closet or whatever, and then you build them and you paint them so that you've got them for a deadline. I had to do that with the terrain for Kill Team. I needed to get it built, and then I immediately needed to get it painted. So that was weird for me to go directly from painting or from building something directly to painting. But it worked. It was a big enough project that it was okay. But generally for me, that doesn't work. For a lot of other people, though, you build this thing and then you paint that thing, and that's the way they like it. The trick is that you have to try to figure out which type of person that you are to help keep yourself hobby motivated. Are you the, I'm going to get into a mode, whether it's build or paint? Generally, you have to build before you paint, unless you're one of those people that paints on the sprue, which I don't understand, but I don't judge. But you basically, you need to get into a mode and stay in that mode for a while and chew through a bunch of projects, all in that same style. You know, just building these guys, building these things, building this terrain, building this other thing, building these people again, doing whatever you're going to do, and then finally get to the point where now you're going to go through and paint. And maybe, and this happens to a lot of people, you build, say, 5 things, but then you only paint 3 things before you get tired of paint again. So then you switch back to build mode, and maybe you build 2 things, and then you just get tired of that and go back into paint mode again. And maybe you paint one of those things you built before, or one of the new things, or whatever. It's up to you to try to figure out how to trick your brain into staying motivated. And for some people, getting into the groove, into the zone, and being in just build mode for a long time, and then being in paint mode for a long time, for some people that works. It works that way for me. But for you, it may be the piecemeal. I do this one, and then that one, and then this one, and then that one, and just kind of work along those directions. Figuring that out is a big portion of what helps you produce more in your hobby and get more things done. And it may sound silly, but if you really kind of sit down and think about it, and maybe even do some experimentation, maybe sit down and build just 3 or 4 projects in a row and see how it felt. See, could you actually do it? Did you get super bored or tired or anything like that? Or did you get into the groove and really become super productive over the course of 4 or 5 or 6 nights in a row, or not necessarily in a row? Most of us usually, sadly, can't hobby, for too many nights in a row because we've got jobs and families and lives and stuff like that. But when you have your hobby time, are you able to go in one mode for a long time? And does that make you more productive? Or is it better for you to be switching gears back and forth? Everybody's different. And so you if you want to try to get more productivity and keep up your motivation, you might want to sit down and look and see which way works best for you. Build mode and then paint mode, or build a project, paint a project, build a project, paint a project. I think it's kind of important for you to take a look at.